Welcome to Meet the Candidates 2022, a voter education program brought to you by the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce. My name is Tim Zunker, and I'm the president with the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Our hope is that these candidate interviews and profiles will help you, the voter, understand your choices when it comes to the 2022 elections. We ask voters to arm themselves with the information necessary to make educated choices and to make casting your vote a priority. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org to find out more information about the upcoming election. And now I'd like to introduce Erik Mortensen, running for Minnesota House District 54A. Erik, Thank you for joining us today, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. Sounds like you've had a long day already today. My name's Erik Mortensen. I've been fortunate enough to be the state representative for these last 2 years. Here to represent Shakopee, Jackson Township, Louisville Township. Redistricting has reshuffled that deck a little bit, but I'm incredibly proud of these last 2 years. 2 years ago, I ran on making a bunch of commitments to never vote for unconstitutional multi-subject omnibus bills, to really be the defender of the taxpayer and a defender of your individual liberties, because if we go back in time 2 years ago, we were under lockdowns and mask mandates. A year ago was vaccine mandates. So I'm very proud of the fact that I've led that charge of the Capitol to take away the governor's emergency powers after 16 months of his dictatorship. And of course, I led the fight a year ago against these vaccine mandates. We had rallies all around the state, and I've tried my best to make all these things to show support. And of course, I had 2 nurse town halls that really got a lot of traction. Even U.S. senators that were sharing these town halls on Twitter. So I really led by example, and I've done exactly what I've told people I would do, literally checking off the list of the commitments I made 2 years ago to make sure I introduce legislation to do all of these things. I've been really an authentic and in an independent voice down at the Capitol, even co-signing bills that were authored by Democrats, because I've always said I'll champion anything and work with anybody if they share the same mission of getting government off our backs and out of our pockets. So I'm proud of the fact that I've done exactly what I told people I would do.
Great. Thank you, Erik. If you could write, sign, and pass 3 laws today, what would they be and why?
Sure. So I think the first one is I authored a bill called the Never Again Bill, and it's gotten a lot of traction across the entire state. Like hundreds of thousands of people have caught wind of this bill. There's even a rally at the Capitol that I didn't organize, nor could I even attend because I was sick at the time, for people trying to get that bill passed before we even passed a budget. And what the Never Again Bill does is it strips the governor's ability to unilaterally declare an emergency, the power he possesses now. And it would ultimately eliminate the ability for a future governor to politicize something like COVID from ever happening again. That's still the only bill at the Capitol that actually has the teeth necessary to make sure it never happens again. The second one, I would say school choice. I think as we look at government-ran schools, they're largely failing. The new scorecards just came out, I think, last week, and I shared that I think it's 61% of the kids here in Shakopee in our public school system are not hitting the standards for science. I think over 50% are not hitting the standards for math. So I think it's just time to admit that government schools are not working. I would argue largely because they're ran by politicians. So I think, allowing dollars to follow the students and empower the parents to decide where that money goes would create a lot of competition. And competition, as a lot of people I hope still know, is really how a free market system works. And it really encourages competition to perform better and even lower costs as well. So I'd say school choice would be number 2. The third, I would say abolishing our income tax. I mean, we even have a governor candidate on the Republican side here in Minnesota that's running on abolishing the income tax, and I think that incentivizes people to actually work, which is a very good thing. And we're one. I think we're still the top. The Tax Foundation does a study every year. I think we're still the 5th highest tax state in the entire nation. So I think abolishing that income tax and then cutting spending accordingly would be a tremendous benefit, an economic boom to our state.
Great. Thank you, Erik. Coming out of the pandemic, businesses are being affected by issues including workforce shortages. What policies would you support in the next legislative session to help alleviate this issue?
Well, I tell you what, lockdowns don't work. Telling people they can't work Dividing people and saying their jobs are essential and their jobs are not essential doesn't work. Vaccine mandates aren't encouraging people to come to Minnesota. And then, like I just mentioned, our tax structure in the state is so punitive that people are leaving Minnesota in droves. I looked it up a couple days ago. There's still 100,000 fewer people working in Minnesota today than they were before Governor Walz's heavy-handed lockdowns. And I would venture a guess that they aren't all sitting in Minnesota. I think everybody knows, and I've seen like friends and relatives moving to low tax states, freer states, South Dakota, Florida, Texas. So I think if we're going to address a workforce issue, it's really not that difficult. I think we just lack political courage down at the Capitol to act on it. And it's cultivating an environment in Minnesota that welcomes businesses, it welcomes people, employees, labor to come back to Minnesota. So I think it kind of goes back to abolishing that income tax, passing the Never Again bill, and making people feel as though their economic activity and their labor is actually wanted in Minnesota.
Great. Thank you, Eric. According to the Office of Minnesota Budget and Management, the general fund budgetary balance for fiscal year 2022-2023 is projected to be over $7 billion. In fiscal year 2024-2025 is projected to be over $12 billion. What policies would you propose or support in the next legislative session considering these budget surplus projections?
Yeah, well, I've been an independent voice on this issue for sure, and the voting records show it. I've been leading at the Capitol and saying the entire time we've had this forecast going back to late last year. And then as we've seen this thing continue to ramp up, and it was pacing, I think at $250 million a week, the surplus was growing. So what I mean by leading on this and being an independent voice on it is I'm the only legislator in the entire state of Minnesota that has refused to spend a nickel of that surplus. And that hasn't been easy for sure, but even Republicans and Democrats, literally every single legislator in the entire state, have been anxious to spend that money and actually collaborating together and spending, I think, just over $2 billion of that surplus this last legislative session. So to me, the answer is pretty darn simple. We should return that money to the taxpayers, which is why I refuse to spend a nickel of it. It's not the legislature's money to spend. We already passed those budgets, or that budget in June of 2021. So we should refund that money, and then we should do permanent tax cuts to make sure it doesn't happen again. I can't help but find it coincidental, at the very least, that these budget surpluses happen to be about the same dollar amount that we collect in the individual income tax. So again, I would bring that back to abolishing that income tax and returning that surplus.
Great. Thank you, Eric. According to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, there were roughly 395 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents in 2021 in the 7-county metro region, which is a 24% increase over 2020 levels. What are the best solutions to lower the crime rate in the 7-county metro, but also throughout Minnesota?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just can't help but say that the fact that my opponent, Brad Tapke, is literally breaking the state law right now, breaking fair campaign practices laws, as he's been claiming he's an incumbent to this office. So I have to say that because it's ridiculous. When people break the law, there should be consequences. And it really is that simple. I think every parent out there, in fact, we just got a new puppy about a month ago. And when the puppy goes to the bathroom in the house, you don't pat them on the head. There's some sort of a consequence. That's how they learn and change their behavior. And that's what we should do with people who are breaking our laws. So to me, it's not so difficult at all. But it's certainly, the answer is not calling Minnesota police officers murderers the way Brad Tapke has. And you don't reward criminal activity the way Brad Tapke has when he tries to make Minnesota a sanctuary state using House File 1500, or when he wanted to let fare jumpers on the light rail, which is already a dangerous place to be, when he didn't want to punish them for not paying their fare. That's just going to invite more people onto these light rail trains and create an even bigger criminal or a violent issue. So to me, it's really simple. And I think a lot of the issues facing us really are simple. When someone breaks the law, there has to be a consequence. We shouldn't be bailing these people out like Kamala Harris pushed in May of 2020 when we had the riots in downtown Minneapolis. And as she was promoting, I think it was called the Minnesota Bail Fund, Minnesota Freedom Fund, but something that was encouraging people to just bail out these rioters and put them right back on the street.
Great. Thank you, Eric. What would your plan be to help with healthcare costs for families and businesses?
Yeah, this question comes up every 2 years. And really, my answer hasn't changed because the problem hasn't changed. like something I think it's over 70% of all healthcare expenses are paid by some form of government, be it federal government, state government. Um, and in any market, like I've already touched on, the way to bring down costs is to increase competition. And right now, we largely have monopolies in every state, and they're a little different in every state. So I think we need to empower the consumer with more choices. I think we need to get rid of the mandates that came down from Obamacare back in 2009. And then we already had our own state mandates, essentially saying all healthcare policies have to cover all these certain things. And when you dictate what a policy must cover, it's of course going to drive up the cost for those policies. And an easy comparison is looking at auto insurance. If your auto insurance provider was told by politicians that they have to cover oil changes, they have to cover tire rotations, they have to cover brake pads, they have to cover, the inflating your tires. Of course, what's going to happen to your auto insurance? The cost is going to go up naturally because the insurance carrier is forced to cover all these different things. So, and then I think last is transparency. People should be able to shop around and know what is this going to cost them or their insurance provider. So I think those are no-brainer things. It's opening up that marketplace and allowing a free market to actually take place.
Great. Thank you, Erik. And do you support passage of sports betting in Minnesota? If so, what would be the best way to implement?
Sure. So I have to admit, I was disappointed that question is even on here. In my 2 years in the legislature, I've had literally 2 people reach out to me about this. One person was for sports betting, one person was against sports betting. And to me, this is just not a kitchen table issue that people are sitting at home concerned about. I think people are at home wondering, how are they going to pay their gas bill? How are they going to pay their electric bill? How are they going to put gas inside their vehicle with $4 gasoline? I think they're concerned about buying groceries. The report just came out today that inflation in August was up another 8.3%. So I think those are the issues that families care about right now. I don't think your average voter is sitting at the kitchen table as a family going, boy, what are we going to do about sports betting? Like, they've got better things to do with their money. And the bill that came before us last year was such a crony capitalist bill that was just carved out for special interest. And it feels like this whole issue is just a manufactured issue by the special interest groups that are poised to enrich themselves if this becomes law. But to me, while I totally support legalizing sports betting, I think we should I prefer decriminalizing, I guess is the better way to put it, because I don't trust politicians to craft this in a way that doesn't just reward a select few people the way the bill did this past spring. So I do support it, but I think decriminalizing it, because these things are already happening. The Super Bowl is going to be coming up. March Madness is coming up. You've got all this sports betting already happening in people's workplaces. So I think we just should decriminalize it and let the marketplace be free.
Great. Thank you. Now I'd like to give you an opportunity to give your final statement and message to the voters.
Sure. Well, thank you. I guess, first of all, I want to thank everybody for the support in the past and the ongoing support out there. It's really been tremendous. The reception at the doors has been a sincere appreciation for the authenticity that I've been bringing to the state capitol and empowering people across the state. While I watch the politicians in St. Paul only concern themselves with their political ambitions, I've made an effort to really fight for the people, not for the politicians in that building. And I've truly been a man of my word. Even the top Democrat in Scott County here, the chair of the Scott County DFL, has twice told me to my face that he has to give me credit because I've been doing exactly what I said I would do. So I think that just speaks to how much of an independent voice I've been at the Capitol, and I'm incredibly proud of that. And what you see is what you get from me, and I think history has shown that. So unlike my opponent who says whatever he needs to say to win someone's vote, and then he stabs him in the back after the fact. So I think this is a race between liberty versus tyranny. I think this is a race between authenticity versus a faker. So I hope to continue to get your support.
Great. Thank you, Erik. As a reminder, the views expressed in these interviews are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber is sponsoring these events as a service to the community and has gone to great lengths to ensure the objectivity. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the citizens and voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. The Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau extends a sincere thank you to the candidates. Thank you, Erik.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time and your service to our community by running for office. You are performing an important service to us all. Again, thank you for joining us for this edition of Meet the Candidates 2022. Please join us September 29th at River Valley Church for our candidate forum. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org for more information. Thank you. Thanks again, Eric.
Yeah, thanks.